The Vampire King tested her loyalty in silence. What she did while he watched shocked him. The castle loomed above the valley like a sleeping giant, its dark stone walls curling into the fog that clung to the mountains. No sunlight had touched its towers for centuries, yet its interior glimmered with the soft glow of candles that never seemed to burn out. It was said that the Vampire King, Lord Kalen, ruled this castle with a power that could crush kingdoms, yet no one knew what lay behind the icy mask of his face. Whispers of his cruelty floated like smoke in the villages below, and yet, in the heart of that stone fortress, one mortal girl had caught his attention. Elara had come to the castle after her village was burned to ashes by a rival vampire clan. She had been found wandering the woods, trembling and alone, her dark eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something unyielding. Kalen did not speak to her at first. He observed her from shadows, silent and distant, as if she were a delicate creature under a microscope.
There was something about her, the way she did not cower completely, the way her hand shook only slightly when she spoke, the way her gaze held both fear and defiance.
She intrigued him, and intrigue was a dangerous thing in his castle. Life in the castle was like stepping into another world. The corridors were long and winding, lined with marble statues that seemed to watch her as she passed. The air smelled faintly of incense and old stone, and distant laughter sometimes echoed, though she never saw its source. Servants hurried past her, bowing as she walked, but never meeting her eyes. Even the youngest vampires kept their distance. Elara was an outsider, yet she had been given a place to stay, a room in the highest tower, overlooking the dark forest that stretched like a black sea below. At first she spent her days exploring, timidly walking through halls that seemed alive with secrets. The library fascinated her the most. Its shelves rose to the ceiling, stacked with dusty tomes and scrolls filled with words she could barely comprehend. There were books about magic, about ancient bloodlines, and about creatures that could command both life and death. Elara spent hours poring over them, her fingers tracing the faded words as if touching them could give her the knowledge to survive in this strange new world. Kalen never entered her room. Instead, he tested her from afar. Sometimes she would find a note tucked under her pillow, simple instructions that seemed impossible at first. Bring a flower that only blooms under moonlight from the castle gardens. Deliver a message to a ghost who wandered the halls at midnight. These tests were not punishments, they were puzzles. And though she did not understand why she was being tested, she felt a strange pull to try. One evening, as the sun's last rays disappeared behind the mountains, Elara wandered into the castle courtyard. Mist curled around the stone pillars, and the moon cast long shadows that seemed to reach out to her. She had heard whispers of the king's presence here, but she saw nothing, until she noticed the faintest movement atop the tallest tower. Two golden eyes glimmered from the darkness. Kalen watched her silently. Not a word passed his lips, not a sound from the stones, not even the rustle of his cloak. He only observed, and Elara, feeling that unspoken gaze, did not run. Instead, she pressed forward, letting her curiosity guide her. A sudden noise made her freeze. A small figure, a young vampire boy, darted from the shadows, tripping over his own feet as he tried to reach the gates. His face was pale, and tears streaked his cheeks. Elara rushed to him, catching him before he fell completely. "Are you hurt?" she asked gently, her voice carrying across the misty courtyard. The boy looked up, wide-eyed.
I was just trying. He could not finish.
Alara's heart tightened. She knew that fear. She had lived in it for weeks now. She lowered herself to his level, holding his hands. "It's okay. I will help you. Come with me." The boy hesitated. Behind them, a dark shadow moved. Kalen had descended without sound, his form gliding across the courtyard like a phantom. Yet he did not intervene. He only watched. Elara led the boy to a small, hidden passage that she had discovered days ago. It wound through the castle, unseen by most, and opened into the library. There, she placed the boy safely on a chair and gave him a warm drink. He relaxed, the tension in his small shoulders easing. "You're brave," Callan's voice finally echoed through the hall, soft and commanding, yet distant. Elara spun around, heart hammering, but saw no one. The shadows seemed to cling tighter to the corners of the room. I didn't know you were here," she said, her voice trembling. "I was always watching," Callan replied, stepping from the shadows with a grace that made her catch her breath. He was taller than any man she had ever seen, and his eyes held centuries of knowledge and pain. "You protected him, without a second thought. And yet, you are mortal. You could have been harmed, and still you acted with courage. Why?" Elara swallowed. Because it was right. I couldn't just leave him." Callan studied her in silence, the firelight flickering across his face, revealing the faintest shadow of emotion. He had not expected honesty, nor bravery, nor compassion from a mortal in his halls. For centuries he had ruled with fear, and yet here was a girl who acted not out of fear, but from the heart. "You are unusual," he said finally, a word that sounded like both admiration and disbelief. Most would have fled. Most would have served only themselves. Yet you surprise me. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. She could not read his expression, could not tell if his words were praise or warning. Still, something in the air shifted. She felt a strange connection, though she did not understand it. Over the next days, her tests continued. Callan's challenges were subtle but perilous. Carrying a lantern through the corridors of the castle's abandoned west wing, fetching water from a well said to be cursed, observing the spirits of past kings and queens without flinching. Each task tested her resolve, her heart, and her courage. And each time Callan watched in silence, sometimes from a tower window, sometimes from the shadows of a hallway, his eyes never leaving her. He noted the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her hands trembled only slightly, and the way her lips pressed into a line when fear threatened to overtake her. One night she was sent to the castle's southern garden to retrieve a silver flower said to bloom only under the light of the blood moon. The garden was overgrown, wild and crawling with thorns that reached for her skin. The wind howled through the empty stone paths, carrying whispers that sounded almost like laughter. Elara moved carefully, her fingers brushing the leaves as she searched for the flower. And then she saw it, a single silver bloom glowing softly in the moonlight, delicate yet radiant. As she reached out to pluck it, a gust of wind knocked her balance, and she stumbled. A shadow moved behind her, and her heart leaped. Callan stepped forward, silent and imposing, his presence alone making the air seem heavier. "Do you wish me to catch you?" he asked softly. Elara shook her head. "No, I must do this myself." He studied her for a long moment, and then without a word, he stepped back into the darkness. She carefully plucked the flower and held it close, her breath coming fast. She had done it. She had succeeded. When she returned to the main hall, Callan was waiting, his eyes golden in the dim light. He reached out, taking the silver flower from her hands, turning it slowly in his fingers. "You understand, do you not?" he asked, "that every choice you make here, Draven, is a test. And yet, you surprise me every time." Elara felt both fear and pride. She did not know what he meant exactly, but she understood that her actions mattered, that she was being watched, and that every step she took could shape not only her fate but the king's as well. Callan's gaze lingered on her as she turned to leave. For the first time in centuries he felt something unfamiliar, a pull toward someone who could challenge him, someone whose courage and loyalty were unlike anything he had ever known. The shadows around him seemed to grow heavier, yet warmer, as if acknowledging her presence. As Elara climbed the tower stairs to her room, she felt his eyes follow her. She did not look back, but a shiver ran through her. She sensed that this silent observation was more than mere curiosity. It was a reckoning. That night, as the castle slept under the eternal twilight, Callan stood atop his tower, the silver flower in hand, and whispered into the wind, "So she surprises me." And somewhere deep within the labyrinthine halls, a spark had been lit. A spark that could ignite change, hope, and perhaps even redemption. The night held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The castle seemed darker than usual that evening, though the moon shone pale over the mountains. Shadows stretched across the walls, curling into corners, twisting along the marble floors as if alive. Alara felt the weight of the castle pressing down on her as she walked through the hallways. Each step echoed, making her feel both small and exposed. She could sense Kalen's presence, though she did not see him. The air was heavy, almost expectant. Kalen watched from the tallest tower, silent as ever. His golden eyes glimmered in the faint candlelight, tracking her movements with a precision that could unsettle anyone. He had never been so intrigued by a mortal before. Most humans were weak, fearful, obedient. But Alara was neither. She moved with courage, thought with clarity, and carried a quiet strength that refused to be broken. Tonight, however, he had planned a test that would challenge her in ways she had never faced. Not only courage, but loyalty, intellect, and her sense of morality. A messenger silently entered Alara's room, placing a small note on her desk. She picked it up, noticing the faint shimmer of Kalen's seal. She unfolded it, reading the elegant script. Retrieve the heart of shadows from the southern wing. Face the trials. Show your loyalty. Alara's stomach tightened. The southern wing had long been abandoned. Whispers of ghosts, curses, and unspeakable dangers lingered in its halls. Yet she could not refuse. Kalen had sent her here not as punishment, but as a test of trust, and perhaps, as he hoped, of character. She lit a lantern and stepped into the corridor. The air smelled of damp stone and ancient decay. Each footstep echoed like a drum beat, and the shadows seemed to twist, forming shapes that mimicked her movements. She paused, breathing slowly. Fear was present, but it did not control her. She had learned that the castle, for all its darkness, was a place where courage could shine brighter than any torch. The first chamber in the southern wing was filled with mirrors. She entered cautiously. As soon as she stepped inside, the mirrors shimmered, and reflections appeared, not just of herself but of moments from her past. Images of her village, of the flames that had consumed it, of the helpless villagers who had called for her. Her hands shook, and her heart ached. But she forced herself to step forward. A voice whispered from the mirrors, soft and cruel. You are weak. You cannot protect anyone. You are mortal. You will fail. Alara clenched her fists. I am not weak, she said aloud, though her voice trembled. I will do what is right. The mirrors rippled, as if swallowing her words. Shadows shifted and began to form shapes. Illusions of creatures she had never seen before, with eyes that glowed red and claws that reached toward her. They moved closer. Panic threatened to overtake her, but she remembered Kalen's eyes, watching silently, waiting. She took a deep breath and focused. Instead of attacking the illusions, she stepped around them, ignoring their threats. She whispered to herself, I will not harm unless necessary. I will not falter. The illusions faded, leaving only the cold stone walls of the chamber. A small chest appeared in the center, glowing faintly. Inside lay a black crystal, pulsing like a heartbeat, the heart of shadows. She reached for it, her fingers brushing the cool surface. A sudden chill ran through her. The chamber began to shake. A shadow loomed behind her, taller than any man. Alara turned slowly. Kalen stepped forward, his face calm but his eyes intense. Do you understand the meaning of loyalty? He asked, his voice like silk over steel. It is not blind obedience, it is knowing what is right, even when you are afraid. Alara nodded. I understand. I do what must be done, not because I am told, but because it is right. Kalen studied her silently. The shadows around him seemed to darken, responding to his moods. For centuries he had ruled alone. Trust had been a foreign language to him, and loyalty had been a tool to be earned or punished. Yet here was a mortal girl who demonstrated it naturally, without hesitation. He felt something unfamiliar, a spark of astonishment and perhaps admiration. The southern wing trembled, the stones groaning as if in warning. The crystal in Alara's hand pulsed faster. Suddenly, the illusions returned, but this time, they were not threats. They showed images of Kalen's past, a young king, betrayed by his closest allies, a woman he had loved and lost, centuries of loneliness and power, wielded as a shield against pain. Alara gasped. She understood now why Kalen tested her. He was not only measuring her loyalty, he was testing whether she could face the truth of him and the darkness he carried without fear or judgment. The illusions began to crumble as she stepped forward. "I see your pain," she said softly. "I see your burden. And I will not turn away. I will stand here." The crystal glowed brighter, recognizing her courage. The illusions shattered into wisps of shadow, leaving the chamber silent. Kalen did not move immediately. He only watched, his golden eyes reflecting both pride and something deeper, something almost human. "Alara," he said finally, his voice low and distant. "Few have the courage to face the darkness willingly. Most run or fight blindly. You do not." She felt a shiver of both fear and pride. I only do what is right." "I do not understand all of your ways, my lord, but I will be loyal as long as it is just." Kalen's lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. It was almost imperceptible, yet it sent a warmth through her that she did not understand. He stepped back into the shadows, leaving her alone with the heart of shadows. When she returned to her room, the castle seemed quieter, yet heavier. She placed the crystal on her desk and sat down, her mind racing. What had she just faced? What had she truly learned about loyalty, courage, and the king who watched silently? The night passed slowly. Alara could not sleep, thinking of the illusions, the whispers, and Kalen's eyes. They haunted her, not as threats, but as reminders that in this castle, nothing was simple. Nothing was certain. And yet, for the first time, she felt that perhaps she could rise to the challenges that lay ahead. Morning came, pale and cold. She walked through the corridors again, carrying the crystal carefully. The servants avoided her gaze as usual, but she noticed something different. Small signs of life returning to the castle. Flowers blooming in hidden courtyards, birds singing faintly in the towers. It was as if her courage had stirred the stones themselves. Kalen appeared suddenly in the main hall, as if he had always been there. His presence filled the space with quiet authority. "You have passed your test," he said simply. "Not because you retrieved the heart of shadows, but because you faced fear without yielding to it. Few mortals or immortals have ever done so." Alara bowed her head, unsure whether to feel pride or fear. "Thank you, my lord. I only did what I believed was right." Kalen's gaze softened, but only slightly. "And that is why you continue to surprise me. Courage is rare. Compassion rarer. And loyalty. Loyalty is a treasure worth guarding. You may yet teach me what it means to be alive again." Alara did not respond immediately. She only felt the weight of his words pressing against her chest. She had survived the test, yet she knew this was only the beginning. The castle still held secrets, dangers, and shadows deeper than she could imagine. And Kalen was a man, or rather, a legend, who could not be understood easily. That afternoon she explored a hidden garden tucked away behind the castle walls. The flowers were strange, glowing faintly under the light of the sunless sky. The wind carried whispers of long-forgotten voices. She felt a presence behind her, but did not turn. She knew it was him. Kalen had followed, silent as ever, watching, learning, testing. "You walk as though the world belongs to you," he said quietly. "Yet it is a world of shadows. You have survived here because of your heart, not because of strength. Remember that." Alara turned slowly, meeting his golden gaze. "I will remember, and I will do my best." For the first time, Kalen allowed himself a long, lingering look at her, not as a ruler looking at a subject, but as a man seeing something extraordinary, something that challenged centuries of solitude, darkness, and control. The sunless sky began to darken again, and the castle seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere deep within the stone halls, shadows twisted and stirred, waiting. And Kaelin, silent and watchful, whispered, "She is unlike any I have ever known, and yet I wonder, will she survive what comes next?" The story ends on this note, leaving the reader with a sense of suspense and anticipation. Elara has passed her first major test of loyalty and courage, but the challenges ahead, both in the castle and in Kaelin's heart, remain unknown. The castle lay in uneasy silence that night. Outside, the wind swept across the jagged mountains, carrying the distant sound of thunder. Within, the halls echoed with a quiet tension that was almost alive. Elara moved through the corridors, carrying the Heart of Shadows carefully in her hands. Though she had passed Kaelin's tests, she knew instinctively that the true trials were only beginning. She entered the main hall and paused. Candlelight flickered across the high ceilings, casting shadows that danced like spirits. The castle felt alive in a way that made her heart race, walls that whispered secrets, floors that seemed to watch her every step. She had grown accustomed to the feeling of being observed, but tonight it was different. There was something more intense in the air, a weight of expectation she could not name. From the tower above, Kaelin watched her as always, yet tonight his eyes were sharper, more calculating. There had been rumors of rival clans moving against his kingdom, seeking to challenge his power. The castle's shadows carried whispers of spies, invaders, and traitors. Kaelin's plans were precise, but even he knew that one misstep could cost him everything. And now, Elara was part of that world, a mortal, untested by real danger beyond his walls. It began with the sound of movement, a quiet shuffle in the courtyard.
Elara paused and listened.
Through the tall windows, she could see a figure approaching. The shape moved with stealth, but she recognized it immediately, a vampire from a rival clan, known for cunning and cruelty. Her heart tightened. She had never fought anyone before, and yet instinctively, she knew she had to act. The intruder entered the hall silently, shadows wrapped around him like a cloak, and his eyes glowed faint red. He moved with purpose, searching for Kaelin or the Heart of Shadows. Elara's first instinct was to hide, but then she thought of the boy she had protected weeks before, the creatures she had spared, and the courage that had guided her through Kaelin's tests. She stepped forward. The intruder's gaze fell on her. "Dorothy."
"A mortal," he sneered. "You dare stand in my path."
Elara's voice was steady. "I will do what is right," she said, holding her ground. Kaelin watched silently from above, noting every movement, every breath, every flicker of doubt and courage in her eyes. He had always controlled the battlefield, the shadows, and the people under his rule. Yet now he realized that Elara possessed a type of bravery he could not command. She was untested, yet she faced danger with clarity and heart. The intruder lunged, but Elara moved quickly, using her knowledge of the castle's secret passages. He led him on a chase through twisting corridors, avoiding traps and stumbling over uneven stone floors. She did not fight with strength, for she had none. Instead, she fought with wit, courage, and agility. Each decision she made slowed him down, guided him into dead ends, or misled him long enough for Kaelin's presence to tip the scales. Kaelin finally descended from the shadows, moving like a phantom, his golden eyes fixed on the intruder. With a flick of his hand, shadows surged forward, restraining the attacker. The intruder struggled, hissing, but Kaelin's control was absolute. Elara, breathing heavily, stepped back to watch.
"You did well," Kaelin said quietly, almost to himself. "Better than I expected."
Elara looked at him, confused. "You mean I helped?" Kaelin's gaze softened, just slightly. "You did more than help. You acted with intelligence, courage, and loyalty. You protect what matters without hesitation. That is rarer than strength itself." Elara's heart raced, She had survived the intruder's attack, but she knew that the danger was far from over. Kaylin's praise was unlike anything she had expected, and yet it carried a weight she could not fully understand. Over the next few days, the castle was tense. Whispers of rival clans reached the walls, warning of impending attacks. Kaylin's demeanor became sharper, his presence more commanding. Alara, meanwhile, continued her tasks, guided by both his tests and her own desire to protect the castle and its inhabitants. One evening, Kaylin summoned her to the tallest tower. The wind howled around them, tugging at her cloak, and the moon cast silver light across the mountains. He stood by the edge of the balcony, silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon.
"You have grown stronger," he said finally, his voice low and deliberate. "But strength alone is not enough.
You must understand sacrifice." Elara's brow furrowed. Sacrifice? Kaylin's gaze met hers, and she saw the weight he carried, the centuries of loneliness, betrayal and pain that had hardened him. There are choices that must be made. Where every path brings risk, loyalty is tested not in comfort, but in peril. You will face such a choice soon. Elara felt a chill, though the night air was not cold. I will do my best, she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. Kaylin nodded. I do not doubt your courage, but courage alone cannot protect you, or me, from what comes next. Days later, the test arrived. A supernatural storm swept over the mountains, lightning splitting the sky, winds howling like a chorus of spirits. The castle trembled as trees bent and the stone walls groaned. Kaylin and his followers moved to secure the gates, while Elara was tasked with protecting the inhabitants, mortals and vampires alike, inside the inner halls. She moved quickly, guiding frightened souls to safe rooms, blocking corridors where debris threatened to fall and using every ounce of her knowledge of the castle's hidden passages. Her heart raced with fear and determination, knowing that any mistake could cost lives. Then a loud crash echoed through the hall. Kaylin had been struck by falling debris while securing the outer walls. Panic surged through her, but she did not hesitate. She ran to him, ignoring the storm, the wind, and the danger around her. Kaylin was pinned under a heavy beam, blood seeping from a cut on his shoulder. He tried to rise, but the weight of the stone kept him grounded. Elara's hand shook, but she did not waver. She lifted the beam with all her strength, calling upon her courage and the lessons she had learned from the tests he had given her. With a final push, the stone shifted, freeing him. Kaylin looked at her, astonishment flashing in his golden eyes. You risked yourself for me?" he whispered, his voice almost unsteady. He had been alive for centuries, yet he had never seen such fear transformed into action. I could not let you be hurt, Elara said, her chest heaving. It was the right thing to do. For a moment, neither spoke. The storm raged around them, but in that quiet pause, something shifted. Kaylin saw her not as a mortal under his protection, but as someone who could stand beside him, who could face danger with heart and courage. You are unlike anyone I have ever known, he said finally. I have ruled with power and fear. Yet you teach me something different. Loyalty, courage, compassion. Things I had long forgotten. Elara looked at him, unsure what to say. She had faced fear, risked her life, and yet her heart was filled with an unfamiliar warmth. She realized then that Kaylin, despite his power and cold reputation, carried his own fears, his own shadows, and that her actions had pierced them. The storm passed, leaving the castle battered but intact. The inhabitants whispered of her bravery, yet she did not seek praise. Her thoughts were on Kaylin, on the strange bond forming between them. One born of trust, courage, and shared trials. That night, as she returned to her room, Kaylin appeared once more. He did not speak at first. He only watched, silent and still, as if trying to measure the distance between them. Finally he said, You have survived storms, intruders, and shadows. Yet the true test is not over. Darkness will always return, and you will face choices that no one can prepare you for. Are you ready for that, Elara? She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. I I will face whatever comes, she said softly, for as long as it is right. Kaelin's eyes softened, yet the golden fire within them remained. He could not predict what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. This mortal girl had changed something inside him. Something centuries of power and solitude could not. The night held a fragile calm. Somewhere deep within the castle, shadows stirred, as if sensing the bond that had begun to form. Kaelin's lips curved into the faintest smile, one that carried both admiration and caution. So, she may be stronger than I thought, he whispered. Elara, unaware of the full depth of his thoughts, climbed the tower stairs to her room. She paused at the window, looking out at the dark mountains. The wind had settled, leaving only a quiet hum through the stone halls. She felt both fear and anticipation. The castle still held secrets, and the challenges were far from over. Somewhere in the distance, Kaelin stood atop his tower, watching her. He could not speak the words aloud, yet he felt them in his chest. A spark of something dangerous, something extraordinary, something that could change centuries of solitude. She has faced the storm, but will she survive what comes next? He thought, his voice silent in the wind. The story ends here for part 3, leaving the reader with a strong emotional cliffhanger. Elara has proven courage, loyalty, and intelligence under extreme pressure, but Kaelin knows the greatest challenges are still ahead, both in the castle and within their hearts. The castle lay quiet under the first pale light of dawn, though no sun had touched its towers for centuries. The storm had passed, leaving broken branches and puddles of water glimmering in the soft moonlight. Elara moved through the corridors carefully, carrying the heart of shadows in her hands. She had faced intruders, illusions, and storms, yet something told her that the greatest challenge still awaited. Kaelin watched her from the shadows, silent as ever, yet closer now than he had ever been. The castle's vast halls had grown familiar to her, but she still felt the weight of centuries in the air. The weight of the king, the shadows, and the secrets that had been buried long before she arrived. "You have come far," Kaelin said softly, stepping into the hall. His golden eyes reflected the flickering candlelight, making him seem almost otherworldly. "And yet, the curse remains. The darkness that binds me has not yet lifted."
Are you ready to face it? Elara nodded. I will do whatever it takes, my lord.
"I will not falter." He studied her carefully, a faint shadow of doubt in his expression. "This is no test of courage, no puzzle to solve. This is the truth of me, and if you cannot accept it, then everything you have endured will mean nothing." Elara took a deep breath. She had seen shadows, storms, and death. She had seen Kaelin's power and his vulnerability, and she had learned that loyalty was not obedience. It was choosing to stand beside someone, even when the darkness seemed endless. "I do not fear the truth," she said quietly. "I only wish to understand it." Kaelin's lips pressed into a line, and he motioned toward the deepest hall of the castle, the Chamber of Echoes. Few had entered it and returned. Legends whispered that the chamber held the essence of the king's curse, a shadowed spirit bound by centuries of grief, betrayal, and unrelenting solitude. They stepped into the chamber together. The air was thick, heavy with magic and sorrow. Shadows clung to the walls, twisting and moving as though alive. A low hum filled the hall, like the heartbeat of the castle itself. And in the center, floating above a dark pedestal, was the shadow of Kaelin himself, or rather, the essence of the curse he carried. The shadow spoke without moving its lips. "You are not meant to touch me, mortal. You cannot bear the weight of my darkness. Step back or be consumed." Elara stepped forward, clutching the heart of shadows. "I do not step back," she said firmly. "I have faced fear. I have faced danger. I will face the truth of you because I see the man beneath the curse, and I do not turn away." Kaelin's golden eyes widened slightly. No mortal had ever spoken to the curse in such a way. His voice trembled, though he tried to hide it. "You do not know what you risk. This darkness will consume the unprepared." Are you certain? Elara nodded.
I am certain. I will trust what is right, not what is easy.
The shadow hissed and surged toward her, a tempest of black smoke and clawed shapes. Elara lifted the heart of shadows high. Its black crystal pulsed with light, responding to her courage. She stepped forward into the storm, her heartbeat steady, her mind clear. The shadow lunged, wrapping around her like a living wave trying to drag her into despair. She held the crystal close, whispering words she had not known she could speak. I do not fear you.
I see the truth. I see him.
And I will not leave him alone. The heart of shadows glowed brightly, pushing back the darkness. The shadow shrieked, recoiling, unable to withstand the purity of her courage and loyalty. Kalen watched silently, his golden eyes shining with emotion he had long suppressed. Fear, awe, and something else he did not yet name. The shadows began to fracture, revealing glimpses of Kalen's human face beneath the immortal mask, a face of sorrow, longing, and isolation. Elara stepped closer. I see you, she said softly. All of you. And I do not judge. I only stand beside you. The chamber trembled as the shadow tried one final surge, but the crystal flared brilliantly, casting silver light across the hall. Kalen stepped forward, touching the crystal with her hand. Together, their strength, courage, and loyalty combined, and the shadow broke apart, scattering into harmless wisps of smoke. For the first time in centuries, the curse that had bound Kalen loosened. The shadow that had haunted him faded, leaving only him, alive, unbroken, and seeing the world anew. Kalen sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the intensity of what had just occurred. Elara rushed to his side, placing a hand on his shoulder. You are free, she whispered. The curse is broken. Kalen looked at her, his golden eyes glimmering with tears he had not allowed himself to shed for centuries. No mortal has ever faced this, he said softly. No one has ever stood with me willingly through everything. You have done what no one else could. Elara smiled faintly. I only did what was right. I could not abandon you. Not now, not ever. A silence fell over the chamber, not empty, but filled with the weight of centuries lifting from the castle itself. The walls seemed to glow faintly, responding to the release of the curse. Flowers bloomed in hidden gardens, the air smelled of warmth, and the distant mountains reflected the first gentle light in what felt like forever. Kalen rose, taller than ever, his aura still powerful but softened. He regarded her carefully. I have ruled with power, fear, and solitude for centuries, he said. Yet you have shown me something I thought lost forever. Loyalty, courage, compassion, love. Perhaps I am not beyond redemption.
Elara reached out, her hand brushing his. You are not alone anymore. I am here.
And I will stay. For a long moment they simply stood together, two figures in a castle that had seen centuries pass in shadows. The bond between them was no longer test and subject, shadow and mortal. It had become partnership, trust, and unspoken devotion. Perhaps the greatest power, Kalen said finally, his voice soft and deep, is not strength or immortality. It is having someone who sees you fully and still chooses to stand beside you. Elara nodded, her eyes bright. And perhaps the greatest courage, she said, is to trust even in the darkest night. The castle seemed to breathe around them, alive with a quiet magic. The curse was broken, but the world outside still held challenges. Rival clans, lingering shadows, and the weight of centuries awaited. Yet in that moment, Kalen and Elara knew they could face it together. Kalen stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. He did not speak immediately, only studied her with a fascination and warmth he had never allowed himself to feel. I watched you in silence, he whispered, and you taught me what it means to live again. Elara smiled faintly, the soft glow of dawn illuminating her face. Then we will live together, she said. Kalen's lips curved into the faintest smile, a rare and human expression, one that spoke of relief, awe, and perhaps hope. For centuries he had lived in shadows, ruled by fear and the curse that bound him. Now, with Alara beside him, he felt the first real warmth of connection, trust, and renewal. The castle held its breath, shadows retreating into corners, sunlight glimmering faintly on the stone, and the wind carrying whispers of change. Kalen and Alara stood together, aware of the battles yet to come, yet certain that the bond forged in courage, loyalty, and love would guide them through whatever awaited. The heart of shadows pulsed softly between them, a reminder of the trials they had faced, the darkness they had conquered, and the light they had found in each other. As they looked out across the mountains and valleys, the future was uncertain. But one truth was clear. The Vampire King was no longer bound by his curse, and the mortal girl who had faced every shadow at his side had proven that courage, loyalty, and love could triumph over even the darkest power. And somewhere in the silent halls of the castle, Kalen whispered, almost to himself, "She faced the darkness and showed me the light." The story ends on a poetic myth-like note, leaving a sense of hope, renewal, and a bond that will endure all challenges.